Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, and welcome to the Jazz on the Tube podcast. Today we have a really interesting guest, and we're going to talk about a great institution and a great project that he's been involved with for many years. His name is Aldo Mazza. Welcome, Aldo.
Thank you, Ken. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. And before we start the conversation, I want to tell everybody June 26th through 27th, there's going to be a live from Havana percussion workshop, jazz, Cuban music workshop that you can participate in. Now, for some people, this is an obvious no-brainer. They're going to hear about it and they're going to do it right away. You may be one of them. Or you probably know somebody for whom this would be the best thing in the world. So I want to make sure that you tell your friends about it. Right now, the place to go is called kosamusic.com. I'm going to spell it. It's Kosa music.com, and all the information there. This is going to be June 26th and 27th, pretty soon, and we're going to get into it right now to talk about the particulars. But first I'm going to ask Aldo. Hey, Aldo, you've been doing projects with master Cuban musicians for a long time. When did you get started? How did it get started? Where did it start?
Well, it's an interesting question, Ken, and thank you. Before we got into the Cuban project, what happened was that, which is 20 years now, 21 years actually. We started a camp, a 1-week intensive total percussion, the ultimate experience, actually in Vermont, 27 years ago, where people would come from around the world to study with all the top artists they can. The idea was whether you're classical, whether you're Cuban percussion, Brazilian jazz, all the top people from John Riley to Neil Peart and rock to like everybody was that whole idea. And that was 27 years ago, as I mentioned. Then the second project that we extended was Cuban music. I visited the island and I got to meet some friends, and it just totally blew me away. And I had no idea to what extent. Of course, I was originally a rock drummer, and played, some really high-profile people. Then I went to university, studied classical percussion, met the guys in a group called Repercussion, which is a four-man percussion group in classical. But then we started mixing jazz, world music, and all the rest. And I got a degree in classical percussion performance as well as in jazz performance. Oh. Then I got interested in world music, and I did graduate studies in ethnomusicology while traveling the world. I mean, and then I played with everybody from Celine to James Brown to John Bon Jovi. I mean, I've covered everything. I used to do a national TV show, all of that, and a lot of studio work. And so I was very fortunate that I was crazy for a long time and just practice, and I loved this. And and then I went to a camp which just totally turned me around. And I said, this is the way it's got to be done, studying with the masters intensely. So when I got to Cuba and I was doing some research and meeting some people, I said, we got to do a workshop here. So I got to be friends with many of the great Cuban percussionists, Changuito, Geraldo Piloto, Samuel Formel, Enrique Pla, who was the original drummer for Irakere, all the people. So we started doing the same thing in Havana, a 1-week intensive workshop with the guys, and you're sitting and working with them all week. And with Geraldo Piloto, we teamed up, and we worked on this. It was a kind of 2 events in one. The La Fiesta del Tambor, which he is the artistic director of, and then Geraldo Piloto and I are like brothers. We've been helping each other for years. And he said, why don't you join us in your event instead of having your own festival? And I said, that's a great idea. So we did. And there were 3 parts to this project. Our workshop, we would take groups down coming from all over the world, mainly most of our people who come up from the U.S. And we have a OFAC license. We're totally legit, and people can travel to Havana for this workshop and this event. And the festival itself, which features all the top artists all over Cuba, and then they would have a competition in drums, conga, timbales, bongo, and bata. And at the end, the kids would win the instrument, which they didn't have. So we brought down the instruments to give away as the to the contest winners. And so we did that for years, and we're still doing it. Naturally, during the pandemic, nothing is going on. So in spite of that, we decided, well, let's do it online, and this was quite a challenge because normally we go there and we're there all week. There's 4,000 seat theater, concerts every night with all the top people around. Even last year we had arranged with people in New York also to have Pat Metheny and Antonio Sanchez, the band, play as special guests. Each year we would have special guests join us and mix. At one point, even Neil Peart, who was a good friend of mine, said, "Why don't we do this in Cuba?" And then we started organizing that, but of course, that never ended up happening. But the thing is that we're building bridges. So this year we thought, why not, since everyone is in lockdown everywhere, including Cuba, let's do this online. So it's a 2-day event in Havana with all of these top people who were the kind of the creators of the music, as you know, Ken.
Oh yeah, these are the giants. These are the giants.
Yeah. and it's a great thing because they're all captive, they're all there, and I said, let's do this because none of us are going anywhere right now. We will be soon, but for now we're here. So let's build this bridge. Let's open it up. It was a technical issue because of the internet and people don't have the technology all the necessarily. So between all of us, and Horacio Hernandez happens to be living in Havana, and I asked his help as well. Oliver Valdez and Rodney Barreto, who is Chucho Valdez's drummer. We got them all together, all set up. I've been doing the rounds for the last couple of months, making sure that they have what we need to make this happen. And of course, since I've been going there for 20 years and doing this, I have very good relationships with the Ministry of Culture, and so we managed to get some permissions that were fantastic, and everybody's really up for this. So it's going to happen live for 2 days, and we're going to have Dr. Olavo Rodriguez, who has been working with us for the past 20 years. He'll be doing a seminar explaining Cuban music and how it relates, where it comes from. And generally what we do in this event when we do it live is we use that as a first class just to give people a better blank canvas, which when they hear everything else, if they're working with everybody else, they understand much better where it's coming from. Because, Cuba, as far as I'm concerned, is a musical continent.
Yes.
Because of its history and I was talking one day with Horacio, and I said to him, I don't believe this. Every time I come here, and I go 7-8 times a year to Cuba. Oh. I'm always hearing something that I never heard before. I'm going crazy. He says, you're going crazy. I still don't get it. You walk 2 kilometers and you hear something that you've never heard before because these other groups of people come from somewhere else.
This is a good point, and I want to reinforce what Aldo is saying. I've been lucky enough to one time go to the Festival de Tambor, and it was one of the most mind-blowing, mind-boggling musical festivals I've ever been to in my life. And what really blew my mind is I had never heard of it before. I had just sort of seen a little reference to it, and I thought, well, that ought to be good. A drum festival in Havana, that'll be pretty good. Nothing could have prepared me for the depth and breadth of what I experienced. And that's just one festival, one time. So, Cuba is one of these places that you just can't even imagine how rich it is until you're there. We can't even express it. And so I love this anecdote you're telling about the fact that every time you go down, you discover new things that you didn't realize, even though you've been going multiple times a year for decades.
Oh yes, and yeah, and another thing on that note, I remember going to well, it was 2 years ago now. I mean, 2020 is a blank, but 2 years ago I was going to Piloto's house, and he had moved to a new neighborhood. I hadn't been, so I'm looking around, and I kind of missed his house, and because I heard some sounds just down the street, somebody with an open window, and they're playing music, and I got really excited because it was like totally African what they were playing. And so when I finally, caught up with, Piloto called me and he says, "Where are you? I've been looking for you." He says, "Sorry, I'm just around here, but I was going to call you, but I wanted to listen to this first." So he came out and I said, "Piloto, this is like from Guinea, this music." And I said, where does this come from here? He says, "Oh, well, that's Palo Alto. That's music that from the Ivory Coast that I had been working, because I studied a lot the music of West Africa also."
Ah, okay.
He says, "This is they're playing a diba rhythm," and he says, "No, they have a different name, but all of these rhythms, of course, come from somewhere.
Yes.
And they get transformed. And it's really interesting, different parts of Cuba, well, actually, different parts of Latin America, period, will have like offshoots and derivatives or some variation. Just like I was, when I was in Oriente, I was studying the conga, which some people here in New York they'll call the Mozambique, but the conga and the conga line, which is a variation almost of what you hear in Brazil. Like 20 drummers playing surdos and frying pans and all of these other instruments that you don't see in Matanzas or Havana. Totally different. And then I'm looking at this, and so I took some more time to study it and all of that. And then I in my research, what I was seeing was, of course, when the slaves came over from Haiti way back after the revolution of 1700s, a lot of those people had this music from their part of Africa. Which is the same areas that took it to Brazil. So it sounds very much alike. There are many likenesses, and people standing on stilts, that whole thing, and wearing masks, and I can take you back to where does that come from, and it really, oddly enough, the whole hiding behind the religious front of Christianity. Well, it was like it takes you way back, and it takes us back. Are you ready for this? To Italy, Carnival of Venice.
Interesting.
Carnival of Venice. If you analyze and go back, this is amazing.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, though. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. People may not realize that in Cuba, you have this collection, this condensed collection of all these African cultures that you can't even find in Africa. In other words, things are spread out over Africa, but in Cuba you have so much of the African musical culture, but all on one island. It's unprecedented.
And not just that, Ken. There's also like the Spanish. There's the French. There's the Chinese. There are many different, and because of the isolation factor over the years in Cuba, and Cuba is a very, very big island, so for a long time these different areas didn't really communicate. It was many places in the east, which is really the south for us, mountainous, and so you had the Spaniards who were involved in. They didn't mix with other people because it was a very family-centric business. Then you had the French, so you had other groups that had society music. So you have, in Cuba, the invention of instruments in this century, like timbales. What are timbales? Well, they're a descendants of the timpani. And they use kind of the same technique, and they just shrunk them to be able to move them around. And the word timbal is, in fact, in French, the timbal is timpani.
And then the bongo is a Cuban invention too. Yeah.
Yes, and so are the congas, which they don't call congas over there; they're called tumbadoras, because conga is a rhythm. And it's funny because when I wrote my book, which is called Cuban Rhythms for Percussion and Drum Set, published by Alfred, I presented it in Cuba, and I worked very closely with everybody. I didn't want it to be like I invented something. But over the years, because I was facilitating the workshops that we have there, we always had the same questions, the same kind of situations. What is clave? What is the 3/2? And where does the songo come from? Where, all of these questions. So I said they didn't have really the books, the materials. And so I said, I'm going to write this book just so that I can have it have a kind of a course for this workshop. And it came out like that. And now it's out in China. Of course, it's a major seller. But it's funny because when I presented the book, I did not mention the word timbadoras. I mentioned it briefly, but I called them conga. So one of the great masters, Roberto Concepcion, who is the oldest gentleman there who's still teaching everyone, took me aside and said, Aldo, I've known you for years. I love your book. What you've done is really a master work. But there's one thing. They're not called congas. And I suddenly realized I felt like shrinking to the ground because I really tried to be like the person that just came with the methodology of us learning this well.
Sure.
And I made that one mistake. And he said, they're timbadoras. I know you know that.
Gotcha.
And I said, oh my God! In all the million editing
right
hours that we put in, because in the end you go crazy. You don't see half the stuff anymore.
Oh, of course.
And so he said, as long as you know that. I said, it's funny because it came across my mind, and for some reason I didn't do it. And then I said, I'm going to, in the next this now it's like in its fourth printing, but I said in the next printing I'm going to add a paragraph, because I thought then we can't change the world. Everybody knows these as congas.
That's true. That's true.
We're not going to have that argument. It's not worth it. And he said, absolutely, we will never have that fight. But I said it's important for people to know, and to know the difference. And those who want to go deeper, beautiful. If not, it's cool.
Very good. Very good. Hey, this 2-day workshop live from Havana, which everybody can participate in. No matter where you live in the world, if you have an internet connection, you can sign up and be part of this, which is so amazing.
Yes.
I'm not going to say anything good about this pandemic, but the fact that it's made this opportunity possible, maybe that's a good thing. Because otherwise people would have to travel. So for somebody who already understands the richness and depth of Afro-Cuban percussion, to me this is a no-brainer. This is it. You've got to be there. You've got to do it. Talk a little bit to people who may not be in that tradition, but however they're aware of the flavor and the dynamism of the Afro-Cuban tradition, and maybe they're curious about it, maybe they'd like to integrate some of it into their jazz drumming or their rock drumming, or maybe even their classical compositions. What's there for those kind of people?
Well, that's an excellent question, because I get asked that by my students all the time. My experience with anything is you always go study with the best people you can. I'll give you an example. I was a rock drummer and I couldn't read it, but I wanted to, so I went to a camp, and my first teacher in vibes was Gary Burton, who actually showed me how to hold four mallets. So,
Okay.
and then Joe Morello showed me how to trade fours. In my experience, we traded cards. We didn't trade fours. And so it totally turned me completely around. And at that moment, I said, you have to study with the top people. So in this particular case, as you mentioned, what is there for somebody who is not advanced, who doesn't know a lot about it? This is the best thing you can do, because the introduction by the masters themselves on your level, because you're obviously going to understand everything on your level, and you'll take notes, and you'll understand things right away. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so nobody's fault, just because not everybody has the opportunity to go to Cuba 7-8 times a year like me,
right,
and finally figure it out 20 years later.
Exactly.
And then in 10 years, if you ask me the same question, I say, Ken, I finally get it. So,
I want to just say really quickly, I want to just say something really good. Aldo is not exaggerating. Guys, I cannot possibly convey to you how rich and complex the rhythmic sophistication of Cuba is. You've got to be experienced to be understood. But anyway, please go ahead.
Yes, but the thing is, let's not scare everybody, because it's not like going totally above your heads, because once you understand on the basic level, then it's like turning the lights on. Then you understand. Even on the most introductory level, we're going to have Dr. Aravo, who's going to explain how the music relates. So it's a lecture, it's a seminar, and he's the greatest, because after that, anybody mentioning anything, you have a point of reference. You have this canvas, to which you can compare anything you hear. And then we'll sit with Changuito, and we'll have Horacio there. We'll have Piloto, Oliver Valdez, and all of them will have their own points of view. And they won't be starting with the assumption that you know everything, because nobody knows everything. And even they will say, I don't know that. And just because, and this is the funny thing, Ken, as you know, there's so much going on and so many different parts to it that there's no way anybody can know everything, and they know that. And it's in constant evolution. So now we're like in the thick of it.
Yep. And that raises another very important point here. As sophisticated as this information is, it's very human. The way it's transmitted is very human. The way teachers and students interact with each other is very human. And
also, just to interject here, I'm sorry, but it's important I say this. I've invited Walfredo Reyes Sr. in San Francisco to join us for several reasons. He's come to Cuba with us because we've been longtime friends, but I know he knows everyone there. He is the last living bridge between the old Cuba in the late 50s and the new Cuba since. The musical developments I'm talking about.
Sure.
He was one of the first guys who was a percussionist and transferring everything to the drum set. He was a jazz drummer. He was everything. And he worked with everybody. He was in Vegas in the beginning of the whole thing. He was in Havana while working with the same people back and forth, including like Cachao, who was the greatest bass player, who's passed. I think he passed away in his home in Florida. But he knew everybody then. He knows the stories, and he's a funny guy. And I invited him on purpose because he knows all the guys there, but he also knows the history of the people who invented the music. For example, Changuito was credited to developing the songo with the group Los Van Van. And the other person with him, Changuito was the drummer for Los Van Van, and the bass player was Formel.
Right.
So he's passed away a few years ago, and his son, Samuel Formel, is the leader of Los Van Van now. So he's going to be with us.
Wow.
So this whole development of the songo and where it's going, so we can ask him the question directly. He's been playing with the band for a very long time. He grew up with this, and what happened? What was the thought behind this? What is the development of this? And you have Geraldo Piloto, who has taken that and created the timba style.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you also have Enrique Plas, who was the original drummer for Irekere, and an incredibly modest person. And I remember seeing Irekere as a kid in Montreal.
Oh, okay.
When I just moved to go to university, and I heard Irekere was playing, and I said, "Oh my God!" So I went to see them. Of course, they were totally over my head, but the images and the music is still in my mind, and the things they were doing, mixing traditional stuff with the jazz, with the new concepts, new ideas, it was like mind blowing. And this is like centuries ago, it feels like.
Yeah. Well, this raises another issue. So I think clearly anybody who sits behind a drum set needs exposure to this material. If you're a rock drummer and you get even a little of this, I think it's going to transform your playing. I think jazz drummers, same thing. I think anybody doing anything in the percussion world. Now, let me ask you this: what if somebody's not they're not a musician, they're a serious fan, they love the music, they're curious? What would they perhaps get out of participating in some of this?
Yeah, no, great question, because I was going to say we'll have the classes. The classes will be an hour long, but after each class we'll have hangs, Q&As, and discussions. So if anything comes up that is not quite clear, somebody listening to, let's say our musicologist explaining, what this is, what something is called, why, what is Cuban hip hop, for example, like where do they take their material from, or this new Cuban funk. You have this group called Cima Funk. Mm-hmm. That's come up, and they're become huge. And the guy is a mix between Prince, Michael Jackson, and Cuba.
Oh wow!
and it's amazing what they're doing, and it's on a level where now you're speaking to the guys, and they're not going to talk necessarily technically. Because music being an emotional thing. What is going on? What is the reason something happened? Like musical reasons. At a time, how did songo come up? Well, they were listening to American funk, and they'll tell you who they were listening to, mm-hmm. and watch out for this, like explaining certain styles, where they came from, and it all makes sense. Plus the discussions between people, and I think it will open the appetites and even put smiles on a lot of faces, because it's going to be like a permanent hang for 2 days. It's not just sitting there taking notes and playing and being impressed. It's really about sharing, and like the guys are on fire. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Geraldi, for example, the other day we were doing a technical test, and I had to say, Geraldi, for the purpose of this event, this class, when you're speaking, especially when you're playing, you have to slow it down. Because what you just played, I didn't even see your hand.
Oh my goodness!
Oh really? Okay, no, I'll make sure everybody understands everything. I said you could do that just to show where you can take certain things on a musical level. Because the nice thing about Cuba is they're not into just the technical parts of it, just to be fast, just to be flashy, just to be anything. It has to make sense musically, mm-hmm. because they're under pressure to make sense all the time, mm-hmm. so, which is a nice thing. So if you're
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Cuba, in Cuba, music is not. I mean, there certainly are concerts, and there is the performance dynamic where you're in the audience and they're on the stage, but largely Cuban music is still the music of the people, and
Yeah.
it has to do with getting together and dancing or worshiping, and it is fully integrated with life. So
Yeah.
it's you don't have esoteric or overly intellectualized. I mean, there's you have intellectual aspects to the music, of course, and
Yeah.
there's certainly
Yeah.
many great intellectuals in Cuba, but at the level of music, it is alive,
Yeah.
and it's designed for human beings and designed for dancing, and for
Oh
people
yeah.
getting together. So you would say that if somebody, maybe they've never held a drumstick or never slapped a skin, but if they love music and are interested in music, this might be a transformative experience for them to participate in as an observer.
Absolutely, and it would also get it from the horse's mouth, as they say, and just listen to those people in their context, because it's not like they've come here in your living room, and I shouldn't say in your living room, in your concert hall, in our concert hall, and they're out of context. They're in their home,
Mm-hmm.
in their context, and they're talking, they're living it, and they're talking as if you're in their house, you know.
I'm going to
And
say this is probably like the next best thing to actually going to Cuba, but maybe even more. It may be even more powerful than going to Cuba because, Aldo, you've organized all the very best people, all the masters, into 1 2 day session. You couldn't. Let's put it this way: a person going down there on their own, you'd probably have to go 10 times a year, maybe for a couple of decades,
yeah,
to begin, just to begin to assemble what Aldo's going to lay out for you on a silver platter in a 2 day period. So this is big stuff. So we're talking about June 26th, 27th of this year, which is coming up shortly. To find out more information, again, it's Kosa Music. That's KOSA Music.com. Give us an idea of what someone can expect. When does it start in the morning? How long does it run each day? What kind of
yeah.
time should people allot for this?
We've arranged it so it begins at 10 a.m.
Okay.
Eastern Standard, and we finish by 5. More or less. I mean, if people want to hang on a little bit, that's fine too. But what we do is we have an hour class and then a half-hour hang, an hour class, half-hour hang. We'll take an hour for lunch and then continue. And we finish by 5. Most people do have families, they have work
Sure.
to do, they have other things, etc. But we're going to send links where people can see the performances of the artists. We'll call them the evening performances, or they can see that at their leisure at another time. So some people on the West Coast might have to get up a little earlier, or if they're in Europe. But generally, it works out, and that's the time that we had to do this, and we didn't want to abuse. We didn't want to overdo it, but it's going to be, set up where there's enough downtime between, hang time, so that we let people kind of
Digest.
How shall I say it?
Digest.
Yeah, digest, and just be friendly about it, because it's serious. I mean, in Cuba, everybody's very serious about it. They don't take themselves seriously. They take what they do seriously, which is nice.
That's a really great distinction. These guys are musical rocket scientists in a sense, huh? and yet in their interaction with each other and with you, and they're just normal, regular, down to earth people. So it's the best of humanity, really, the best aspects of humanity.
That's right, yeah.
Super
and
seriousness.
So, and that's why I call this like a historic 2 days, because I mean, this could not happen if the pandemic would have been. Everybody is just too busy. It's just impossible. But the fact that it happened, it allowed us. I said, what can we do? I mean, number one, to help them, because they're stuck just as much as we are, and build this bridge. And I said, this will be great for everybody. And we have everybody captive, and they're totally there and totally available. And these are people who, let's not forget, a lot of those people are very well musically educated. In Cuba, the conservatories and the music schools are, if you get to this level, you are, more regarded than a doctor. These are very important people in society. Yep. And so they have a lot of respect from everyone. So you have two things going on. All these people are trained conservatory, university musicians, but everybody understands the music. So society there, everybody grows up with it, whether they studied it or not. So when Changuito walks down the street, they know who Changuito is, and they think he's a god. But he doesn't walk around with his, in a Mercedes Benz.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's all about the music. It's all about relationships. It's all about sharing. And of course, the inner pressure is you got to maintain what you do well. So it's beautiful to watch. So they just go home and quietly do their work, and they come out and they share it with everybody, and everybody has fun. And they said, "Did you check this out? Oh, check this one out."
Now we're not going to be able to go into depth on every single participant, but let's just go through maybe a few of the names of the people who are going to be involved on the faculty.
Yes.
Maybe we'll start with Horacio Hernandez.
Yes.
Just a little background so people have a sense of who he is, where he's coming from.
Right. Horacio is a very interesting personality. He, of course, was born in Cuba and there for a long time, and does a lot of studio work. He comes from kind of Cuban musical royalty. And at one point, Dizzy Gillespie heard him, and he invited him to join him. And he actually had defected Cuba. He was in Italy, and that's actually where I met him. It was in Rome.
Oh.
And Dizzy Gillespie was arranging for Horacio to come to the States. And so Dizzy had a direct line to the White House at the time. So they're arranging this, and they had arranged for Horacio to go to the embassy in Rome to get his papers and all of that stuff. Unfortunately, Dizzy passed when this was going on, and so he had to find out a different way. Finally, he came to the States and ended up touring and performing with Santana. And then Santana, Michel Camilo, a lot of great people. He's just a genius. And now he's touring the world, but he went back to Cuba to take care of his mother, so he has a place there. And of course, now most of the time, if he's not touring, he spends there to take care of his family and things. And he's just one of these people that has broken the barriers of musical tradition, because he's kind of between, of course, he knows the history, he knows all of that. The left foot clave, his foot is like playing clave, while the rest of him is like three other people, musically.
So that's Horacio. So how about, now you mentioned Changuito.
Yeah.
Can we even describe Changuito adequately? What can we say? What can we say? We can talk about his influence, for example.
Yeah. Well, yeah, his influence. Well, he's one of the few non-trained musicians. He was just a genius from the get-go, and he's been a guiding light in all this music. And there's many books written about him. He's an incredible teacher, an incredible, how should I say it? Where this stuff comes from, nobody knows. And I had a conversation when I sat with him going through this book. I said, please, in the Songo especially, let me know if there's anything that doesn't sound right. I'll change it. And he looks up afterwards and he says, "This is fantastic, but I have some things I have to show you, and we have to sit down, which will be another 3 books." And I said, "Oh my God, I know, because when we brought him to to Kosa in the States
Mm-hmm.
for a week intensive, I asked him for a favor. I said, while you're here, I want to take one lesson with you if you have an hour. And we did. And I recorded it. And he showed me some things that it took me years to master.
Wow.
And he would come in the room and he'd play it. He says, well, do you understand? And it was just mind twisting. Simple, but like technically your mind just couldn't go there. So it took me a long time to get this. Finally, I have some of those things in the book because I had recorded them, fortunately. And at one point, he did something for his performance at Kosa at the camp, because we'd have concerts every night. When he started performing, he started playing just maracas, and he started playing some rhythms before going to the timbales and congas, because he's a master timbale player, the independence, and some musical ideas that he comes up with that are just fascinating and flabbergasting. He started playing something on maracas that I couldn't even follow him. And I turned to the guys, and then he went to the congas and timbales, and then the drum set. I turned to the guys in my group who were there that particular year, and one of the guys was went deep into African drumming, even much more than I did. I turned around to him and I said, Robert, are you able to follow him? Because I lost him. Every once in a while I would see where he's coming from, but I don't know how in God's name did he get this? Listen, this is beautiful. This is amazing. He's looking at me. He says, I just went blank. He says, I have the same problem, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I don't feel so bad now. But and then I say to myself, he's like, it's like Elvin Jones. Where did that stuff come from? Mm-hmm. Where did he? Did he have a direct line to God, to Africa, to where did it come from? And I know Changuito has never been to Africa, although he's African descendant, of course.
Sure.
But where did this come from? Honestly, Ken, he's like one of those things that there's a direct line somewhere.
Yeah.
That's just coming to him, and he comes up with these ideas.
Yeah.
That are, for a musician, is like your mini mind explosion.
I'm almost going to say just the opportunity to learn from Changuito directly, as people will be able to do, that alone is worth the entire program, in my opinion, because this is a treasure that can't be reproduced, I don't think. And now notice, guys, we've only mentioned 2 of the faculty. We could be here all day talking about the rest of the faculty. This is some deep stuff, and yet it's accessible, it's human. And I'm going to say, if you're a percussionist, you must do this. It's for your own sake, But even if you're not even a musician but love music or fascinated by music, this is going to be a taste of something that is rich and fabulous, that you cannot get from any other source. And again, the program is kosamusic.com, KOSA music.com. It's this June 26th through 27th, live from Havana, 2 days of direct connection with Cuba's master percussionists, sharing everything they can in a very human, accessible way. And Aldo, so great to talk with you, and thank you for all that you do, and in particular, thank you for putting this together, because there are a lot of people who may never have a chance to go to Cuba and experience these things, and you're bringing this literally to their living rooms.
To their home.
Yeah,
and by the way, I will be hosting this, so I will be guiding it, making sure that everyone gets questions answered, or at least knowing what's going on and in those 2 days, because we always want to make sure, as we do historically, that we treat everybody like family. We treat everybody like this is an opportunity for us to learn and share and come up with things that you don't have the opportunity every day to do.
Yep.
So, as you said, for those who don't have the opportunity or may not have the opportunity to travel to Cuba, which is just an amazing thing, as you know, this is like totally the next best thing, because they're coming to your house, to your living room, or wherever you happen to be sitting.
Yeah. So I want to also encourage everybody strongly. You probably have drummer friends in your life, and percussionist friends, and people who love Afro-Cuban music, people who love music in general. Do us this service to share this information with as many of your colleagues as you possibly can, because they will be very happy that you let them know about this opportunity. So Aldo, thank you so much. I can't wait myself for this. It's very exciting. My calendar's already blocked off for these 2 days, and thank you for this. This, folks, again, this is an amazing thing that's going on here. This is not just another thing.
I also want to also thank you, Ken, for giving me the opportunity to get this and share that with your audience. And also, I want to congratulate you on the great work that you're doing to, keep the world open, the world and minds open to all that stuff that's going on. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.